Loren, today we want to tell the story through the eyes of John and Sue. John and Sue, we took them through their 50s. We talked about some of the decisions they had to make. That's the show that's on YouTube. Today, we're going to take John and Sue through their 60s. What's kind of the overarching things they're thinking about in this decade?
Yeah, in this decade, they're thinking about when are they going to retire, and when they retire, how are they going to cover some of these things that they've always been thinking of, but they just never had to make these decisions before. So some of these things are going to be, well, what are they going to do from a healthcare standpoint? Because John and Sue, for much of their career, have had their group healthcare option. Well, when they retire, they're going to have now a whole host of different options that they're going to have to select from to provide their health care. And those options are going to change depending upon what age they are. So as an example, at 65, they have Medicare as an option. Prior to 65, they don't have Medicare as an option. So what are some of the other options they're going to have to sort through as well? They're going to have to determine where they're going to get their income from. They have a lifestyle they've grown accustomed to. They want to maintain that lifestyle. So where's the income going to come from? They have a number of different resources to take the income, but how are they going to manage that income, not only at point of retirement, but make sure they still have enough 10, 20, 30 years into retirement as well.
And I think the neat thing is, yes, for John and Sue or whoever you are sitting out there, this will be the first time that you've made these retirement decisions. But because you've been doing this for over 20 years, you've helped people make these decisions hundreds and hundreds of times, and you apply some principles that you know because you've been doing this need to be part of the retirement plan.
Most definitely. One of the most common pieces of feedback that we get from families that we start working with is, I want to make sure I get this right. They realize you have one shot to get this right. They're starting to identify some of these decisions that they're going to have to make, and you start to realize most of these decisions are permanent decisions. Once you elect your Medicare Part A, that's a permanent decision. Once you elect your Social Security, that's a permanent decision. Once you elect your pension, these are decisions that you cannot undo in many occasions. So you want to make sure you get it right. You want to have confidence as you're navigating through this minefield of legislative changes and all these decisions you have to make, and that's the value of that comprehensive retirement plan.
Okay, let's go back to John and Sue. They're in their 60s. They're concerned about healthcare. I think healthcare can drive the decision about when they retire. So let's talk about maybe the options they have before 65, before that Medicare eligible age, and after 65.
Yeah, and in this example, we're going to assume that John and Sue retire at 65. Okay, so at 65, they're going to retire. Let's take them prior to age 65. Prior to age 65, they're on their group healthcare coverage plan. But what if John loses his job? His plan to retire was at 65, but life doesn't always go as planned. So John was carrying the healthcare option. John was let go from the position. Now, John and Sue need to find another healthcare option. They have an option to take COBRA insurance for 18 months, which means that they can be on the group healthcare plan. They are responsible for the cost of that healthcare plan, but because it's group coverage, it is probably less expensive to John and Sue than if they were to go out to the true open healthcare market, because it's a group plan as opposed to an individual plan. So they could take the healthcare, the COBRA coverage for 18 months, but what happens once that 18-month expires and they're still not 65, what are they going to do for healthcare? There's a couple other options they can look at. They can look at the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is wildly misunderstood, and the Affordable Care Act eligibility is not asset-based, it's income-based, which means that John and Sue, if they have a little bit of cash that they can live on from an income standpoint, so they're not having taxable income from pre-tax IRAs or even their Social Security, they could live on cash, have no taxable income, which means they could pay no to very little premium on the Affordable Care Act. So that could be an option that they could explore. And by the way, that could be an option that they decide to take even over COBRA. So if right away when John loses his job, if that's a better option than the COBRA insurance, then they could go with that up until 65 as well. And then once they obtain the age 65, then they're going to transition to Medicare.
And then typically it's Medicare, you move into Medicare, and then maybe some supplements to cover whatever Medicare doesn't cover?
Yes, as complex as Social Security is, we talk about this a lot. There's up to 81 different options that John and Sue would have with Social Security. Medicare is even more complex. So there's Medicare Part A, and then there's Medicare Part B. Those are the common pieces of Medicare most people are familiar with. If you have worked long enough, you're not paying for Medicare Part A. but you will pay for Medicare Part B, and there's some planning strategies that will go into this, because if your taxable income is too high, you're going to pay more for Medicare Plan Part B than what you otherwise had to. So part of the strategies that John and Sue will look at prior to 65 are maybe some Roth conversion strategies. But some of that tax planning, some of those Roth conversion strategies could increase their taxable income to a point where they're going to pay a lot more for their Medicare Part B, and Medicare Part B looks 2 years back at their income. So John and Sue, once they obtain age 63, have to start being careful about what their taxable income is with some of these tax planning strategies, or their Part B premiums are going to increase as well.
So possibly doing the Roth conversions before 63 might be a good strategy for some people.
For those of you who are prior or younger than age 63, you have a real opportunity potentially to incorporate some of these really cool tax planning strategies that will increase your current taxable income, but may not impact what your Medicare Part B premiums are. But let's say, like in John and Sue's example, they're 63 now. They still might want to engage in some of these tax planning strategies, even though it could increase their Part B premiums, but that's all a part of the evaluation. The important part is you evaluate all of these moving parts, and then you can make your decisions based on the information that you have, the accurate information. You can make these decisions with confidence, because you know the decisions you make today, they're going to have this type of implication down the road, positive or negative, and you can make these decisions with eyes wide open. Thank you for watching this clip of Retiring Today, and don't forget to subscribe. If you have questions about your retirement plan, take advantage of the complimentary 15-minute retirement checkup phone call.